Ellie, my friend, after that inverted flag was reported, Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Dick Durbin said that Justice Alito should recuse himself from the Trump presidential immunity case and other cases that involve January 6 defendants, but he stopped short of calling for an inquiry. But now, with this news of a second flag, not only is it Durbin, but it's also Senator Sheldon Whitehouse that are requesting a meeting with Chief Justice John Roberts to address a, quote, ethics crisis. Ellie, do you expect Roberts to say yes to actually meeting with them to discuss what's going on in his backyard?
John Roberts is the Melania Trump of Supreme Court justices. He really doesn't care. All right. And we know that Roberts does not care about the ethical disaster that is his Supreme Court by Roberts' actions. Roberts is speaking loud and clear when he does things like allow Sam Alito to write voting rights opinions, as he did in 2021 in Brnovich v. Arizona, and as he did this week, in the gerrymandering case brought by the NAACP in South Carolina. Not only does Roberts let Alito write these voting rights opinions, where, of course, Alito denies the voting rights of black and brown people all across the country. No. Not only does Roberts allow Alito to write these opinions, but he released the opinion this week. This case that came out this week from the NAACP, that was argued back in October of 2023. It could have been released kind of any time before the flag controversy, or Supreme Court is probably going to go until just before July 4th weekend. Roberts could have put it in the back pocket and released it in a couple of weeks, hoping perhaps that the flag controversy would blow over if Roberts cared. But he doesn't. And he wants people to know that he doesn't. And that's why he's allowing Alito not only to write these opinions, but obviously doing nothing within his power, both hard power and soft power, to address the ethical concerns on his court.
Yeah, Ellie, I'm glad that you pivoted to that South Carolina decision, because I think it's really important for people to understand the import of what happened this week with that coming out. Not only was it now justice delayed, justice denied, but Alito has now created an impossible standard to be able to prove racial gerrymandering. He's now saying that there has to be direct evidence of racism versus any, circumstantial evidence that may result when you look at the results of the gerrymandering that occurs with the drawing of the district lines. I mean, is this now a new legal standard because it comes from the Supreme Court that will be the kind of bar that has to be met in order for any challenges to gerrymandering to be raised?
Yes, that is what Alito did. To reach the constitutional protection of the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause, which is supposed to prevent this kind of racism from happening. To reach that standard now, you can't reach that standard by showing what Republicans do through their actions, right? If they draw a district that systematically removes all of the black voters from the district, which is what happened in South Carolina, that's not enough. What you have to say when Alito's talking about direct evidence as opposed to circumstantial, what he's saying is that you need the map maker to literally sit there while they're drawing their map and say, I'm fitting to do some racism today. That's direct evidence. And unless the map maker, unless the Republican legislature gerrymandering the districts says directly, oh, we're doing this because we hate the blacks. Unless they say that, then you don't have evidence of racial impropriety in redistricting cases, according to Sam Alito. That's a look. There are white people who are absolutely racist enough to say that, like Donald Trump exists. I'm not saying that it can't ever happen, but the idea that you can only prove racism if the racists admit what they're doing is bonkers, but it is part of the insurrection, right? It is part of what Alito is trying to drive at. The thread, and I've said this before, but the thread that ties Alito's upside down flag and insurrectionist flags to his judicial opinions is this. He does not think that the votes of black and brown folks matter. All right? He thinks that as long as the majority of white people want something, whether that be Trump being president or whether that be black people not being able to vote in Nancy Mace's district in South Carolina, he thinks that's okay. The reason why Alito doesn't think that he is an insurrectionist, even though he is because even though Donald Trump lost the election, Donald Trump won the white vote. He won white men, he won white women. And so according to Alito, that's enough. That means Trump should be president because white people want him to be president. And that's all that matters to Alito, not the votes of everybody else.
I have a concern about delay, seeing how Jack Smith gave the Supreme Court the opportunity to take up the presidential immunity case earlier than later, but yet we still sit here today kissing June 1st, right, and we don't have a decision from SCOTUS. Ellie Ying-Mastal, we're going to have you back when that decision comes out, because I'm sure you'll have a lot to say about it then. My friend, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.